Congressman, very quickly, we're going to have to let you go in a second here, but did any of the Tea Party freshmen that came in, did any of them vote for the continuing resolution?
I think that I don't know which ones are defined necessarily as Tea Party, but I believe there are at least 20 freshmen that voted no on the continuing resolution. So I'd look at them as the core. And there are some full-spectrum conservatives that need to be rehabilitated because of some of the votes that they've had to take. And we can't hold them accountable for all this right now, Eric. I mean, this is a big deal, and you're focusing on it in the right way. But the freshmen were put into an arena that they could not have possibly been able to feel all of the currents that were flowing back and forth. I want to give them a chance to put their credentials back together, and I hope they can do it maybe on the debt ceiling.
Very good. Representative Steve King, Republican from Iowa, thank you very much.
Thanks, Eric.
All right, with cities and states across the U.S. on the brink, lawmakers are desperately searching for a way out, but unions are saying, whoa, not so fast. We want ours. We'll hear from one guy who's backing the unions next. And sick-outs breaking out all over the country as big labor whines about proposed cutbacks to bloated budgets. The irony is that overpaid, overbennied unions are bulging state and local and federal budgets. Take Michigan, for example. The state is broke. Detroit is broke. So when newly elected Governor Rick Snyder suggested budget cuts to avoid a first major American city bankruptcy in decades, the unions went wild and took to the streets. The keynote speaker from yesterday's Michigan protest was the mayor of Lansing, Michigan, Verge Bonero. He joins us now. Verge, thanks for joining us. So is it so darn important to protect the wages and benefits of the union members that you're willing to bury a state, bury a city, throw Detroit possibly into a bankruptcy? Why won't you negotiate? Why won't the unions negotiate with the governor?
Well, Eric, of course they'll negotiate. And the issue is, that's one of the issues, is collective bargaining. Are we going to have top-down, where orders are dictated from state government like a monarch, or are we going to have collective bargaining, where the people have a right to bargain, which I think they do in this country. And I'm happy to live in a country where people can collectively bargain and where they can also protest, where they can petition the government for redress of grievances. So I'm proud to stand with union brothers and sisters and working people everywhere. And by the way, Eric, we talked about this before. You know, when organized labor does well, all working people, they raise wages for everybody. You know, those benefits, those benefits and pension that some people enjoy, they didn't just come out of a genie's bottle. They came because of collective bargaining and the rights that labor won.
Mayor Verge, or when organized labor demands such a high salary that it's so far above the free market wage and benefits that in times, Verge, you know this, federal workers all in make double what the private sector makes. They make 4 times the benefits and almost double the salary, the wages of the private sector.
That's not true at all.
Unsustainable.
That's not true at all. I don't want your viewers to believe that. The fact is, when you compare apples to oranges, it is about equal, or the private sector does much better. The fact is, if you look at what a doctor working for the government makes, or a psychiatrist or psychologist compared to in the private sector, they make more. When you compare apples to apples, in fact, it is a decent comparison. And what's wrong with a little security? What's wrong with a little health care? Should people have to be forced into poverty?
You're misleading the public right now. The number is almost double. An average federal worker, an average Fed makes $123,000 all in. An average private sector worker makes $61,000, and they make 4 times the benefits. But allow me. But what that means is that puts the burden on. Forget small businesses for a second, because we'll talk about public sector unions. It puts the burden on states, municipalities, yourself, Verge, Lansing. How's Lansing doing?
Well, Lansing is struggling. Of course, Michigan is struggling because of the manufacturing that your buddies on Wall Street sent overseas. You know, it's a funny thing. You want to blame the unions. The fact of the matter is, and we've discussed this, and you can check it out, Google this. The fact is that when the unions were at their strongest in the 50s and 60s, everybody else was doing better as well. The fact is, when that union wage went up, it raised everybody else's wages.
Google this,
coincidentally, that was when America was making things. We were making things. That was before your buddies shipped everything to China. That's the problem.
Google Lansing, Michigan, and let's find out what you have to do in your own town, because you have wages and benefits exceeding the revenues. You're going to have to cut people. You're going to have to cut people or lay them off. Is that right?
We're considering that. We're also considering increasing the millage rate. The fact of the matter is we are suffering as a state, and I'm trying to provide vital services. So, yes, we're suffering. We're also suffering from the loss of manufacturing, the hemorrhaging of manufacturing jobs. You know, when those jobs were here, these companies were making money. These companies were profitable. They went overseas because they could make more and because they lack patriotism. They didn't go there, and because they don't want to pay a decent living wage. Of course, in China, they can pay people dirt and pollute the environment. Why not go to China and India?
Blame all that.
How are we going to compete with that?
By the way, Verge, are there unions in China?
I'm sure not. Maybe
of course, and that's why labor is going over to China, because they don't have to pay exorbitant labor rates.
And is that what you recommend? Are you endorsing the kind of authoritarian government and the lack of free speech? They also go there for that, and they also have children working. Child labor, slave labor. Give me a break. Is that where we're headed? Maybe that's why people are in the streets, because we don't want to become China. We don't want to become India. Now, India is a democracy. People are. There's a little more freedom there. But the fact is there's a huge disparity between rich and poor, and that's where we're headed. The unions created the middle class in this country.
Disparity between people who work for the government and people who work for the private sector. The problem is when people who work for the government are paid double what the private sector is paid. It's unsustainable.
That is absolutely
and things
fallacious.
like Lansing, Michigan happen where you're going to have to lay off people or make some cuts.
That is absolutely false. That study is not apples to apples. And the fact is, you know, you talk about this big deficit. You talk about the fact that the states are broke. The reason the federal government is broke in part is because you did away with the inheritance tax. You extended the Bush tax credits. You know, we're tired of the trickle down. We're tired of the trickle down. That's what people were protesting. We'd like to see bottom up. How about you take care of the grassroots? You take care of the people here and let the growth happen from the bottom up instead of hoping that something, if we let people get rich enough, richer and richer, eventually some of it might trickle down. We're tired of being trickled down. That's what we said yesterday.
Verge, the bloated benefits and salary packages that you're offering state, local, and federal employees, or they're going to drive the state or the municipality into bankruptcy. By the way, it may not be a bad thing, because guess what happens in state bankruptcy or city bankruptcy? You can renegotiate with the unions.
Yeah, you can treat the unions like they do in China. Look, I know what you're trying to do, which is divide and conquer. Let the working people go at each other, when in fact it's the unholy alliance of Washington and Wall Street that has sold out Main Street all these years. That's what we're suffering from, these free trade policies. And how come we have all this money? We can go into Iraq, we can go into Afghanistan and fix those communities. How about we spend a little money domestically? Why don't you cut those programs and let's spend it here?
We spent a lot of money already bailing out states across the country. We have to leave it there. My good friend Verge, we'll see you again very, very soon.
Good to see you. Thanks, Eric.
All right, we know big corporations with close ties to Obama aren't picking up their fair share of taxes. So does Obama want to pick up the slack, or does he want us to? That's next. $14.2 trillion in the hole and counting. We're adding trillions to that number every year forward as far as the eye can see. In fact, we'll be at $21 trillion in debt by 2021. So who's going to pay for all this? It ain't going to be the 47% of Americans who pay 0 or less federal income tax, households that is. At the end of the day, it's you and me picking up the tab for all the spending. Maybe that's why it's so infuriating when you hear that big corporations with close ties to the White House aren't paying their fair share. Companies like GE, Google, Boeing. Here to break all this down is Tim Carney, senior political columnist for the Washington Examiner. You know, Tim, the big one, the Mac Daddy of them all right now seems to be GE, making $14 billion, $14.2 billion, actually getting a tax credit at the end of the year, at 2010. Break it down. Why does Google pay 20%? Why does Boeing pay little or no tax whatsoever and get government contracts on top of it? Help us out.
Well, first of all, I want to say, I'm not going to say who's paying their fair share or not. Nobody has said that GE did not follow the law or that Boeing did not follow the law. What we see when these giant, very profitable corporations are paying no taxes, we see a broken tax code. And we see that GE goes ahead and hires nearly 1,000 people to work in their tax division because, you know what, that's a profitable thing. They bring down their taxes. That's one of the most profitable sections of their whole company, I'm sure. And that's a problem with the tax code when a business needs to hire or can profit from hiring that many. GE, though, one example, and this is a sign that I think Obama's not serious about tax reform, they got over $100 million in green tax credits. So that's for, you know, building a windmill, solar panel factory or building windmills. So that's a lot of the tax credits that General Electric gets, goes from sort of dancing to the tune that the government is calling. You get a tax break if you do that.
And how does a small business compete with a big monster like GE who's paying no taxes? Meanwhile, small business probably pays 35%.
Yeah, well, you can hire a gigantic tax division, I guess, if you're a small business. Maybe you can afford 975 people like GE can. Obviously, a small business can't do that, and this is one reason why when government gets bigger and when the tax code gets more complex, the big guys actually do better. The
right.
media will always say, oh, it's big government versus big business, and if you want to slash government, well, you're just doing the bidding of Wall Street and big business.
Tell us, Tim, before we move on, but tell us, Jeff Immelt's the CEO of General Electric. He's now been tapped as Obama's job czar. Does that seem fair to you?
Well, the thing about Immelt is that he has always been on the same page as Obama. It's fitting, whether it's green subsidies, whether it's even embryonic stem cells, whether it's high-speed rail, the TARP, healthcare reform, they've always been on the same page. But no, I don't think there should be a job czar, but if it is, picking a guy like this who is just gaming government, to me that shows what Obama thinks the private sector is for, not sort of creating wealth to match demand, but trying to profit off of whatever the government is telling them what to do. So I find it fitting more than fair.
Tim Carney from Washington, D.C. Thank you very much, Tim.